It's time to kick off a new run of sponsored episodes, starting with the first episode I've ever done about a real person. Sponsored by Patreon supporter CD Freedom, these are the basics on the most prolific Transformers comic book writer of all time, Simon Furman. Born in Surrey, England on March 22, 1961, Simon Furman got his start in comics at IPC magazines in the early 80s. At first, he was a copywriter in the competitions department, until he was recruited by editor Ian Rimmer to serve as his assistant editor on the 1984 horror anthology Scream, for which Furman would do his first professional comics writing. Scream was short-lived, lasting only a few months, and after it folded, Ian Rimmer went to work for the British division of Marvel Comics, right around the time that work was beginning on the Transformers comic. Now, at first, the British Transformers series just reprinted the comic that Marvel was publishing in America, but it soon began running its own original stories in between the American reprints. In late 1984, Rimmer introduced Furman to the series editor, Sheila Cranna, and she commissioned him to write some of the earliest UK original material, beginning with The Enemy Within, which ran in issues number 13 to 17 from March to May 1985. From that starting point, Furman went on to become the comic's main writer, scripting nearly every UK original story for the rest of the series' lifespan. But writing the stories wasn't all he did for the comic. When Cranna stepped down as editor in mid-1985, Ian Rimmer took her place, and, as at Scream, hired Furman on as assistant editor. In this capacity, one of his jobs was to run the comic's letters page, replying to letters in character as various different Autobot and Decepticon hosts. Furman left this position in late 1986 when he was appointed the editor of Marvel UK's new Thundercats comic. But this didn't last. When Rimmer departed Marvel UK in early 1987, management pulled Furman from Thundercats and put him back on Transformers, now as the editor in charge of the whole comic. Furman's work on Transformers was very different to the American series writer Bob Budiansky's. Budiansky's stories were mostly about the Transformers' interactions with humans, leading to many quirky, offbeat stories that British readers didn't love, whereas Furman's had a more serious tone and focused predominantly on the robots themselves and their unique personalities. Most of his early stories starred the Dinobots, whose leader, the arrogant anti-hero Grimlock, became Furman's favourite character. But over time, particularly after he took the editor's chair, the scope of his work grew bigger, as he built upon the characters and ideas from The Transformers the movie to evolve the comic into an ongoing time travel saga revolving around the insane Decepticon, Galvatron. Key original Furman creations included Autobot leader Emerit Zaron and his commando unit, the Wreckers, the robotic bounty hunter Death's Head, who proved so popular that he was spun off into his own Furman-written solo series, and perhaps most significant of all, he crafted a unique origin story for the Transformer race, depicting them as the creations of the God of Light, Primus, made to battle his ancient enemy, the Dark God, Unicron. This epic science fantasy storytelling, together with intense, gritty action, the cast of robots allowing Furman to get away with greater amounts of death and carnage than he could if his stories were about humans, seized the imaginations of young British audiences, and made the comic one of the top-selling boys' action-adventure titles in the country. After wrapping up his time travel story in early 1989, Furman chose to resign his Marvel staff position, leaving as editor to focus entirely on his writing as a freelancer. Coincidentally, around the same time, Bob Budiansky decided to leave the American series and asked Furman to take his place. Jumping at the chance to do his first work for Marvel US, Furman took over the American series from issue number 56, published in May 1989. He immediately brought the energy of his UK work to the title, kicking off a new cosmic epic about the coming of Unicron, while also telling character-focused stories that made cult favourites of bots like Autobot Detective Nightbeat and Decepticon Samurai Bludgeon, and established a stable of repeating memorable turns of phrase in his scripting that fans would come to call Furmanisms. Before his arrival, the comic's sales had been declining significantly, and it was thought to be in danger of being cancelled within a few issues. But Furman re-energised the comic's bored audience and slowed the sales slump enough that the series was able to last for another 2 full years. Through the rest of 1989 and into 1990, Furman wrote for the US and UK series simultaneously, but the end was inevitable. With general interest in Transformers waning, sales eventually dropped past the point of sustainability. The UK comic ceased running original material in late 1990, and the US comic was cancelled with issue number 80 in 1991. Furman figured this was probably the end of his relationship with the franchise, and even noted in a farewell letter published in the final US issue that the chances of Transformers ever being revived were incredibly small. Needless to say, he couldn't have been more wrong. When the Transformers toy line was relaunched as Generation 2 in 1993, Furman returned as the writer for the new tie-in comic, which continued on from the end of the original series and lasted for 12 issues before being cancelled due to low sales amid the comic book market crash in 1994. In his sign-off in the final issue, Furman wasn't as pessimistic as last time, promising that if Transformers returned again, he'd be there. Still, Generation 2 proved to be Marvel's final Transformers comic, and a few years later, with freelance writing gigs drying up, Furman began working as an editor again at Titan Books. While working there, he was invited to attend the official Transformers convention, BotCon, in 1997, and to produce an exclusive one-shot comic for the show with his old Marvel collaborator, artist Andrew Wildman. Previously, Furman had no clue that there were even still Transformers fans out there, but the convention showed him that his work still had an audience. He went on to write several more stories for both BotCon and the unofficial convention Transforce over the next few years, and he was even able to convince Titan to license and publish the first ever reprint collections of the original Marvel series, serving as editor on the project. Furthermore, through BotCon, he met Beast Wars cartoon showrunner Bob Forward, who invited him to do his first TV writing, scripting the final episode of the series, which aired in 1999. With his connection to the world of the Transformers now firmly re-established, Furman decided to reach out to Dreamwave Productions when they acquired the Transformers comic license in the early 2000s. As a result, he was soon brought on to write both the War Within series, for which he created the ancient evil Transformer, The Fallen, and the tie-in comics for the newest toy lines, Transformers Armada and Energon, and was able to leave Titan and return to freelance writing full-time. Now, infamously, Dreamwave went bankrupt and shut down at the end of 2004, leaving Furman's stories unfinished. But the writer was quick to bounce back. When the Transformers license was picked up by IDW Publishing in 2005, they employed Furman to be the architect of their new comics universe, building a new Transformers continuity from the ground up. Furman started by playing against type, opening with a human-focused conspiracy thriller story that reimagined the Transformers conflict as a Cold War being fought in secret on Earth. But as the story continued, unfolding over an interweaving collection of miniseries and one-shot character spotlights, he was soon back in cosmic epic territory, as the universe itself came under threat from the evil Nova Prime. These new ideas mixed with innovative reinventions of classic concepts like Pretenders and Headmasters, with prominent roles for many of Furman's signature characters. Though not every new take was a winner. Furman had always been of the opinion that the Transformer race shouldn't have a concept of gender, so he made that idea canon for the IDW universe. The sole exception was the female Autobot, RC, whose existence he justified by depicting her as, essentially, the victim of a forced sex reassignment surgery. The whole thing went over like a lead balloon, and it's definitely wound up colouring how newer, younger generations of fans view Furman and his work. Eventually, sales on Furman's IDW titles began to slip, and his run on the main IDW series was brought to a truncated end in 2009. But he continued to write other Transformers titles for the company. His other IDW work included Beast Wars, the live-action film series, and most significantly, 2012's Regeneration 1, a continuation of the original Marvel series that allowed him to bring that continuity to a definitive end. Really though, Dreamwave and IDW were just the tip of the iceberg. In the 2000s, Simon Furman was the Transformers author, spending the decade working on projects of all shapes and sizes for publishers all around the world. These included multiple reference books, foremost among them Transformers: The Ultimate Guide, a key publication in which he expanded on his Primus and Unicron mythology by introducing the legendary first 13 Transformers. A 4-year run on an ongoing live-action film series comic for Titan in the UK, pack-in comics for toys, DVDs and video games, more stories for the official convention, manga for Million Publishing in Japan, and more. The end of Regeneration 1 in 2014 was the end of an era, marking Furman's last regular, ongoing Transformers comics work to date. But he has made brief returns from time to time, notably writing another Marvel Continuity one-shot for IDW in 2019 and a sequel miniseries, Secrets and Lies, in 2020. And he's continued to be a frequent contributor to the brand in other ways. From 2016 to 2020, he was the editor on Hachette Partworks' definitive G1 collection of Marvel, Dreamwave and IDW comic reprints. He wrote for the 2023 Transformers Earthspark video game, the unreleased game Reactivate, and since 2016 he's been the writer for the Earth Wars mobile game, which is still regularly producing new content. His 4 decades-long body of work comprises some of the most important and influential Transformers stories ever told, responsible for a foundational shaping of the world, characters, and mythology of the franchise in a way that virtually no other creator can boast, which still informs its stories today, and has inspired a generation of fans who've grown up to follow in his footsteps and work on the brand themselves. But, of course, while it might be what he's best known for, Transformers isn't the only thing Simon Furman's done. Other titles he worked on at Marvel UK in the 80s included Action Force and his original creations Dragon's Claws and the aforementioned Death's Head. And at Marvel US in the 90s, he worked on She-Hulk, RoboCop, Alpha Flight, and others. In the mid-90s, he wrote Turok Dinosaur Hunter for Valiant Comics, and in the early 2000s, he and Andrew Wildman founded an IP development company, Wildfur, and created the animated webcomic, The Engine. After Beast Wars, he wrote for TV shows such as X-Men Evolution, Roswell Conspiracies, Mad Hatter Chronicles, and more. Since his return to full-time freelance writing, his comics work has included a reboot of Death's Head for Marvel, Terminator for Dynamite Entertainment, StarCraft for Wildstorm, Robotech for Titan, a return to his roots reviving IPC characters like the Leopard from Lime Street and others for Rebellion Publishing, and creator-owned projects To the Death, co-created with Marvel UK artist Jeff Sr., and crime thriller 5 Points. At the time of this video, some of his most recent projects include Titan's King Kong series Return to Skull Island, Astrobots for Massive Publishing, based on the toy line of the same name, and an exclusive comic for the official Transformers store in London's Battersea Power Station, proving that, like the man himself says, when it comes to Simon Furman and Transformers, it never ends. And those are the basics on Simon Furman. But don't take my word for it. Listen to the full story of his career in much more detail right from his own lips on his and Andy Wildman's podcast over at wildfur.net. Thanks to CD Freedom for sponsoring this episode. Share your thoughts about Furman's body of work, your favourite stories, moments and characters in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for more history and lore from the world of the Transformers.